All right, it's a new week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards with lots of conversation, interaction with other Pitt fans all day, every day. Everything going on in Pitt sports, you can read about it on Panther-Lair.com, and then you can go to the Panther-Lair.com message boards and talk about it. It's kind of everything. You know, you've got the information and you've got the community. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. So check it out, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And then, of course, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you can keep up with our video stuff. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe button's right down there. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of our content, you can click subscribe and then turn on notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live or every time we post a new Morning Pitt video. You know, we do our weekly live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We do that every week. You know the deal there. But sometimes we go live after post games, or go live for post games, I should say, or go live if some big news comes out or something like that. You never know. We might go live. We haven't had any surprise ones lately, and to be honest, it's probably for the better. Those surprise ones tend to. It's not always for good news, although sometimes it is. You know, sometimes we could go live after some big commitments or something like that. But anyway, you don't want to miss anything we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you click subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss it. Of course, over the weekend there was a lot to not miss, a lot to keep up on and pay attention to and enjoy as far as Pitt stuff goes with the NFL draft. Pitt fans were talking about a lot on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and on Thursday last week we did sort of our draft preview episode as far as what to watch for in the NFL draft from a Pitt perspective. You know, what were you really keeping an eye on? And we said, you know, there was a realistic chance that Pitt could have 6 players drafted, which would tie the most since the NFL went to a 7-round draft format. Tie for the most players they've had drafted in a single draft. 2004, 2021, they had 6 players each, which set the high water mark. And we said this year has a real chance to get there. And they did, but they didn't get there with the guys that we expected. Well, we got 5 out of the 6 that we expected. I don't think we had Eric Hallett on our list of guys who were likely to get drafted. I think Haba Baldonado had a better chance, but Hallett ended up going in the 6th round to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Haba Baldonado went undrafted. But he signed an undrafted, rookie free agent contract. A bunch of guys did that. We'll talk about that in a second. But they tie the record, so they hit it with 6. Obviously, Kalijah Cansey getting things started on Thursday night, going to Tampa Bay at pick number 19 overall. Second year in a row that Pitt has had a top 20 draft pick, so that's a pretty good run of success there. And then no more action until Saturday, when you had Carter Warren and Izzy Abanikanda both go to the Jets. Servassier Dennis went to Tampa Bay. Eric Hallett, like I mentioned, going to Jacksonville in the 6th round. And then Brandon Hill, the final Pitt's final selection in the draft in the 7th round of the Houston Texans. 6 players, and it occurred to me as I was watching the draft and kind of paying attention to things and sort of thinking about Pitt's got this many, and they now have 14 over the last 3 years, and they're right up there with one of the most heavily drafted teams in the ACC and across the country, this year. And when you combine the last few years together, and I started thinking about it, and I said, particularly this year's draft and last year, if you look at 8 guys drafted over last year and this year, back-to-back number 1 picks, back-to-back first-round picks, top 20 picks, and then kind of filling out with the rest of the guys that they did, it really kind of tracks with the success that they had. This is the way it's supposed to be. That when, it's not even a chicken and egg situation. If you have the talented players, you're going to win a lot, right? And then those talented players will go to the NFL. And so what you've got is all these guys getting drafted who were part of that 2021 ACC championship team. And ultimately, a team, most of them won 20 games over the last 2 years. Why did they win the ACC championship? Why did they win 20 games over the last 2 years? Because they had the talented players. And the NFL draft is backing that up. I was looking at the 2021 team, the one that went to Charlotte, beat Wake Forest in the ACC championship game. So far, with a few more still out there, if you look at the 22 starters, 11 offense, 11 defense, 8 of those 22 starters have been drafted. And, really we could throw Izzy Abanikanda in there too. Vincent Davis started the game. Abanikanda finished as the leading rusher with 55 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So we could kind of throw him in there as, if not a starter, a significant contributor, a leading contributor. And you've got 9 guys, or 8 starters, I guess, out of 22. Now, we got to, to be honest, I can list these guys out. The truth is, we're obviously counting Jordan Addison there. Jordan Addison was a starter in that game. He's one of the 8 guys who started that game who have since been drafted. And, there was some discussion of this over the weekend. He went in the first round, and we talked about it a little bit on Thursday. There was discussion and conversation about it on Friday and through the weekend about, what you do. How do you count that? That's a USC draft pick, right? He went to the NFL directly from USC, but he spent 2/3 of his college career and his most productive years of his college career and his Biletnikoff award-winning season of his college career in Pittsburgh. He won a conference championship in Pittsburgh. He was on an 11-win team and, again, won the Biletnikoff and was one of the best receivers in the country. His best season was at Pitt. Pitt was the school that recruited him. Pitt was the school that developed him over the course of 2 seasons. And so who claims him? Because you could say that Pitt has had 3 players drafted in the first round over the last 2 years. Now, if you say no, you got to count him as USC. Well, that's okay. I kind of came up with this on Twitter. I said, here's the way to say it. Pitt has now had 3 first-round draft picks from its 2021 ACC championship team. How about that? Just like I'm saying here, they've had 8 starters drafted off of that ACC championship team with a couple more who I think are possible, if not even likely, to get drafted probably next year, I would say. And we'll talk about that. I'm actually planning to talk about that tomorrow. We're going to talk about who the next round of draft picks, who to watch for in the 2024 draft off of Pitt's roster. And I think there's a few guys that we're going to be keeping an eye on. But so far, from that starting lineup, 2021 ACC championship game, obviously you have Kenny Pickett, you have Jordan Addison, and you have Carter Warren on the offensive side. And then 5 of the 11 starters have been drafted so far on defense. 5 of the 11 defensive starters: Kalijah Cansey, Servassier Dennis, Damari Mathis, Eric Hallett, and Brandon Hill. That's pretty impressive. There's only a couple more guys from that starting group. Guys like John Patrician, Phil Campbell, Deslin Alexandra, Haba Baldonado, they're not going to get drafted. They've already sort of gone through the process. But you still have Tyler Bentley. I would doubt he's going to play himself into a draft pick. But Marquez Williams, I think, has a chance. He's very small. That's the thing he's going to have to overcome, and I think that'll be a challenge. But if he can test well and continue to put up good film, and I'll talk about this more tomorrow. I talked about it a little bit last week, that I think it helps being in this defense. If you're a defensive back, if you're a successful, effective defensive back in this defensive scheme, I think you get a couple extra bonus points. I really do. I think Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill both getting drafted. Safeties, not corners, but playing in, as I said last week, a very unforgiving defense for guys in the secondary. Particularly, Eric Hallett playing that free safety position or field safety, and guys who play corner, they're going to earn it, and it's going to be tough at times, but they're going to show what kind of resilience they have, and they're going to show how they handle adversity and how they bounce back, and ultimately how they play when they're on an island where they're the only thing between a pass breakup and a touchdown. And so I think Marquez Williams will get a little bit of bonus points for that. I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick. He'll probably be another Saturday guy. I assume the NFL is doing the same format next year. But anyway, I'm sidetracking here. This is ultimately what this is what you should see. When you have a year like they had 2 years ago, and then you followed up with another 9-win season, what you should see is the NFL draft success following. I remember, and it's not like, it's not a difficult formula to figure out, right? If you have the talented players, you're going to win the games. You know what I mean? It's the Johnnies and Joes more than the X's and O's. That's what they always say. I remember reading something about the high percentage of Final Four teams that had a lottery pick. And it was some like ridiculously high percentage. It was like almost made the point that, look, it's tough to make it to the Final Four of the championship game if you don't have one of those guys, because it was just such this overwhelming percentage of teams that made it that had a player like that on the roster. And so it only stands to reason that if Pitt is going to, if Pitt has the success that they had in 2021 and even last year winning 9 games, there's probably going to be draft success that follows. There's going to be 6 guys drafted this year and a first-round pick last year. And what's interesting is that you get to the 2020 draft class, or 2021, where they also had 6 players drafted, and that was on, they had 6 players drafted, all rounds 3 through 7. It was Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver and Jason Pinnock and Jalen Twyman and DeMar Hamlin and Jimmy Morrissey. 6 players drafted that year, tying the high, even though they only went 6-5 that year and they were 8-5 the year before. It wasn't exactly like there was this run of success that led into having 6 draft picks that year. Certainly not like this year. I think they, over the past 2 seasons, I think they largely capitalized on the talent that they had. That you end up with 6 draft picks on this team. You end up with, that 2021 team had, 8 draft picks so far, 8 and counting. Or 9, actually. If you want to count Jordan Addison as well. 9 draft picks and counting on that team. Well, yeah, they should have success. I think the conclusion you could come away with is, well, they capitalized on the talent that they had. They maximized the talent that they had and reached a level of success that they haven't reached in 40 years. And so it does sort of line up like that. Now, you end up in some interesting situations where, like I said, the 2021 draft class was a big one for Pitt, but it didn't necessarily follow a couple of good years of success on the field. The 2004 draft class was the other one that had 6 players. That was Larry Fitzgerald. They had 2 second-round picks in Shante Spencer and Chris Wilson. Claude Harriott went in the 5th. Andy Lee went in the 6th. And Brandon Myree went in the 7th. Now, 2003, they were, an 8-5 team. They're a little better in 2002, or 8-4, I guess, in 2003. They were a little better in 2002, but they didn't quite have. I think the expectations were there for 2003 to be a big, 2021 type of season because they had all that talent, and that's ultimately what they should have been able to accomplish. I mean, with that level of talent, that 2003 team ultimately underachieved, and I think we all would agree about that. But you do usually see the draft success follow the on-field success. And I think that's been the case with Pitt here. Running down these picks, Kalijah Kancey going number 19 overall. I think we all saw him as a first-round pick. It was very weird going into Thursday night. Mel Kiper didn't have him as in his his final mock draft. He did not have Kancey as a first-round pick. Thought that was strange. I wondered if Kiper was hearing something or had something to go on. Todd McShay still had him there. Everybody else still had him there, except Mel Kiper, I think, was the only one that I saw. I'm sure somebody else left him out. But Kancey goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucs fans showing their level of preparation. The one video that made the rounds of people saying, who? I mean, Kalijah Kancey's not, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or one of these big name, really recognizable players. But I think if you followed any kind of draft coverage leading up to the draft, you heard Kalijah Kancey's name. I mean, he was pretty well recognized as a first-round talent and a likely first-round pick. So I thought that was curious that they were, less than enthused and really just sort of confused and a bit unsure of who Kalijah Kancey even was. No picks on Friday. Second and third round, nobody went for Pitt there. I kind of thought that would be a bit of a dead zone. I thought Izzy Abanikanda would be the next player taken. I didn't think he would go in the second round. I thought it was unlikely he would go in the third unless somebody really, really liked him. I thought he would probably fall to Saturday. I was like, well, I won't be surprised if maybe a Carter Warren even jumps over him to get taken on Friday. Ultimately, nobody went on Friday, but Warren went with the 18th pick of the 4th round on Saturday. He went to the Jets, New Jersey guy playing in New Jersey, and then Abanikanda went about 23 picks later, number 143 overall, the 8th pick of the 5th round. I think there's generally, well, it's commonly said that there's a general sort of undervaluing or the value is lessened with running backs. And I believe that, and there's a lot of data to back that up. That even having an effective running game is not nearly the key to success that it was once thought to be, or maybe that it once was. And yet, then we have 2 running backs going in the top 12 picks. I don't understand that. And if you want to tell me Bijan Robinson is a generational talent, and that absolutely makes sense for the who took him, the Falcons, okay, but Jahmyr Gibbs, number 12. Not so sure about that. I thought because of the devaluing of running backs, a guy like Izzy Abanikanda, who maybe didn't quite show the pass catching ability or pass protection in college, mostly showed straight line speed along with really good size. I thought he could fall. I thought 4th round. Wouldn't be surprised if he dropped into the 5th, and that's where he went. 8th pick of the 5th round. Also to the New York Jets, a guy from New York City, going to get a chance to play not too far from home with the Jets. 10 picks later was Servassier Dennis going to Tampa Bay. He's going with Kalijah Cansey. So Pitt's first 4 draft picks, first 4 players drafted, taken in this draft, 2 to the Bucs and 2 to the Jets. So you'll be keeping an eye on those games, I guess. The Tampa Bay games and the New York Jets games. But Servassier Dennis goes to Tampa Bay. I think a 5th round pick made sense for him, a guy who was probably a little bit undersized, but really good athleticism, really good IQ, and could be a productive player. And I think he's going to do well in the NFL. Eric Hallett was the next guy to go about 50 picks later. He went 31st pick of the 6th round of the Jaguars. And Hallett wasn't as much on my radar, not as much as Brandon Hill, to be honest, who ultimately went 40 picks later in the 7th round. Brandon Hill was on my radar as a potential draft pick. Hallett really wasn't. He had kind of slid off the board as far as I could tell. I wasn't seeing his name a lot. I wasn't hearing a lot about him. I thought Halba Baldonado would be the guy who, he would be the 6th or the 5th or 6th pick here to get Pitt up to that half dozen number. And so Hallett ends up going. And, the truth is, he was a talented player. He was a productive player, very effective, very good at running that defense. I wonder if Eric Hallett, and I think he tested well, but I wonder if he got those Narduzzi bonus points. And that's not to say, everybody in the NFL, all those coaches just love Narduzzi and trust all his evaluations. But I think they look at that defense and then say, geez, man, if you could play defensive back in that defense and you didn't want to go home and cry all the time, we think you've got not only, some ability on the field, but you've got some mental toughness too. And look, I don't mean to overstate the point or oversell it, but we've all watched this defense for 8 years, right? And going back to 2015, 2016, we talked about how the corners were always on an island and the safeties had no help and all these things, right? We've been watching it. We know how challenging this defense can be for these guys to play, and particularly the defensive backs. And I think Eric Hallett, I think, probably got some bonus points there. Pat Narduzzi told a story after Pro Day that he was talking to an NFL scout who had been talking to one of his players, and he said, "Coach, when I talk to him, it's like I'm talking to a coach. He's just got that kind of understanding of the game." And I think that had to help. I think there are probably a number of guys that applies to. That it could have applied to. I think Servassier Dennis would get described in that way. I think Eric Hallett would get described in that way. And I think that had to have helped them, just their knowledge, their understanding of the game that maybe can make up if there's a physical shortcoming. You're a little, you're a little bit slow, or you're not big enough, or whatever it is. It can make up for some of it because of the knowledge side of it. Ultimately, you got to be able to make the plays, but you can give yourself a better chance or put yourself in better position to make the plays with that knowledge. And then Brandon Hill, I think Charlie Partridge said it on Twitter that Houston got the steal of the draft. I was talking up Hill on Thursday a lot. When we did our What to Watch For in the Draft episode on Thursday of the Morning Pitt, I was saying I thought Hill could be a real steal in the draft, that he would get drafted late. A day 3 pick, probably 5th, 6th, 7th round, like he ended up. but would be a steal. A guy who's just a little bit too short, but is big. I mean, you just saw a photo of him a second ago. That's Izzy now, but the picture before was Brandon Hill. He's built, he's thick, he's fast, he's athletic, he's explosive. He's physical, which again, that's going to show up on tape. That physicality shows up on tape when you play that boundary safety position and you're making 1 million tackles every game. That shows up, and NFL scouts and NFL coaches will see it and say, boy, this guy's a little bit small, but he hits, and he makes a lot of tackles. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there. And I think you get a little bit of bonus for that. And then in addition to, I think, maybe some bonus points for playing in this defense. Probably help Brandon Hill as well. If you're going to take a flyer late, take a flyer on a defensive back from Pitt. I mean, look, Damar Hamlin was a 6th round pick, right? Damari Mathis was a 4. Is there another one? Whitehead and Maddox were 4th round picks. That's it. So you've got the defensive back drafts here. Hallett and Hill this year, that's 2. Mathis last year's 3. Pinnock and Hamlin in 2021, that's 5. Dane Jackson in 2020, that's 6. And then Whitehead and Maddox, that's 8. 8 defensive backs drafted. 8 guys who played for Pat Narduzzi at Pitt drafted. And he recruited almost all those guys. He didn't recruit Maddox. He signed Whitehead, didn't recruit him, but signed him. Same thing with Dane Jackson. I mean, he recruited him. Paul Christ got the commitments from Dane Jackson and Jordan Whitehead. Narduzzi came in and ultimately held on to those guys and signed those guys. But then Hamlin, Pinnock, Mathis, Hallett, Hill, those are all Narduzzi guys. So, I mean, 8 defensive backs drafted since Pat Narduzzi got to Pitt. This is what was supposed to happen, right? That Narduzzi's defense would be really good, would help them win a lot of games, and would produce NFL stars that would draw even more attention to Pitt. And I think that's a lot of that is coming to fruition. We'll see if they all become NFL stars, but they're getting drafted. They're getting opportunities in the NFL, and I think probably next year you'll see another 1 or 2 defensive backs drafted as well. That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow on the Morning Pit, barring any major breaking news or anything like that. We're going to talk about what next year's draft will be, the 2024 draft, and who we should expect to hear their names called when they go, when you get around to the draft next April. So tune in for that tomorrow. We'll talk about who's next among the NFL draft prospects, some obvious names, maybe some not so obvious names. Is there another 1st rounder in the group? Is there another 7th rounder in the group? I think there's maybe a little bit of both. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in this morning. I appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then head over and check out Panther-Lair.com for all the latest Pitt sports news. Hope you had a great weekend. I hope your week gets off to a great start here today on Monday. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.